Hello everyone, welcome to the channel again. We are today with Eleanor and she's from England and we will be talking about whatever you want to share. Hello Eleanor.
Hello.
How old are you, Eleanor?
I am 38 years old.
38. How was your childhood?
It was very complicated. My early childhood, what I remember of it was very whimsical and magical. And my parents kept us in a little bubble, sort of separated from the rest of the world, and we did lots of crazy activities in the house. We had an open fire and we used to run around barefoot and play in the garden. We didn't have TV, except, well, we had a little black and white TV, but we didn't really. And we were encouraged to read a lot and be creative. And then when I was about 9 years old, my parents split up. And so things changed a lot. My mum had 4 kids, so she was looking after us all by herself, and she was very upset, obviously, and it affected the family a lot. So the life changed drastically then. And my mum became a Christian when about a year after my dad left. She started going to church, so we all started going to church, and we all converted in our own way to Christianity. So I was maybe 11 when I got baptized in the church, baptized in a river, which was quite an experience. I still remember that. And yeah, I think life changed a lot then. So I remember being very sad a lot in that part of my childhood.
Why you were sad?
The way my parents split up was not nice. It was not a nice breakup, and I didn't see my father for, I think it was close to a year after he left. And so we went from spending every day and every moment together as a family, because we were such a tight-knit family, to him being gone and my whole world like shattered, because there was just such a huge focus in my household, I don't know, of like us versus them. And we were we didn't really have any friends like outside of our home. Like I used to play with kids in the street, but we didn't go to anyone's houses, and it was just us. And so when my dad left, it shattered that whole thing. And I didn't see him, and the relationship was fraught when we did eventually start seeing him again. And I used to just cry whenever I would see him for years, actually. I couldn't handle it.
You miss him, or you miss
that, and I didn't understand, and I guess I thought it was like a death. So for me, it was like a death, because something that was living, our family was a living unit, many members but one, and then all of a sudden it was ripped apart, and I guess it made me question everything. Like, if that can go, what else could go? Like, I didn't feel safe anymore, and what I thought was solid and true was broken. So I think this is, obviously when I was a child I wouldn't have been able to explain it like that. I was just deeply sad. Maybe I missed him and I didn't understand why this was happening.
And how was your adolescence?
This was kind of uneventful. So in terms of what most people, or what you think most people go through in adolescence, I had the usual thing, like having boyfriends and breaking up with them and having that kind of sadness, and like writing in my diary, and but we had a really steady routine at home. I went to the school that my mum was a teacher at, so I still had this connection with her and everything. We moved house when I was 14. We moved to a whole other place, so not just in a different part of the town. So I had started again when I was 14, but again, this wasn't, for me, it wasn't really stressful or damaging in any way. It felt just like a new beginning in a kind of positive way. And yeah, I don't think I was a very rebellious teenager. I was very obedient to my mum, and didn't start drinking or smoking or anything like that, like a lot of British teenagers do. Yeah, quite juvenile.
What did you learn from both stages, as a young child or adolescence?
When I looked at that question when you sent it to me, and I was thinking about that, and I think I've learned more now, as an adult, looking back on those stages, than I actually think I did at the time. I think I just existed and survived. Well, I flourished and enjoyed my young childhood, where everything was magical and it was fairies and wonderful things. And then the whole breakup period, I actually have very little memory of this time, and I think my body did that on purpose to block it out. So if someone asks me about something that happened, do you remember we went there? Or I have no memory of a lot of these things. So I think that was self-preservation. And I think as a teenager, I started making some of the awful mistakes that would later in life have a big impact on me. Because let's say, like, I don't know, if you plant a garden and some weeds get in there, you don't notice them at first, but then if you don't pull them out, then they grow, and then later you notice the damage. So at the time, I don't know what I learned, but now as an adult looking back, I think in my childhood, I learned kind of impermanence of that things can just shatter, and that if you put your trust and faith in something, just be careful, you know, like, because it might not last. And I think looking back on my adolescence, I learned a lot of bad things in my adolescence. I learned that if you were pretty, you could go far. I learned that if you could manipulate people with emotions. I learned all of these kinds of behavior which I would later use in life and regret. I learned to be proud, so like I was very proud that I was quite intelligent, smart, and took great pride in that. I liked to read complicated books, and I was good at maths, and so this pride was building in me in this time. So
at the school, do you learn all that stuff in the school where you were, or at home, or where did you
what do you think
got all that?
I don't know. I think this kind of pride in yourself thing, I think I picked that from my parents. I don't want to blame them for it, but I feel like my dad is very much, his identity is based on like how much he knows, and he's very, because he didn't have much growing up, so his mind is his strength. And he's very proud of that he is self-taught guitar and this kind of thing. So I think this had an impact on me, that the most important thing that you could have is your mind. This is what I started to feel. I don't feel that now, but at the time it was like, right, well, I better learn all these things. I had an interest in all these things, but there was a pride in it. I wanted to be seen as somebody who was
force.
Yeah, like I have to be like almost like a vanity in it, like a really vain thing. And then of course like physical vanity thing. I think I learned from my mother, which is really awful. I don't want to. My mum is an amazing woman, and I've learned so many positive things from her. But looks and how looks fade, and it's completely understandable now, because her husband left her when she was in her 30s with 4 children for another woman, a younger woman, beautiful woman. And so obviously that has an impact. And I think my mum is beautiful, and she always tries to look nice, but I think maybe I valued this a lot more than I should have, because I saw it, like I saw maybe what the negative things, if you're not pretty enough, then maybe you won't have a relationship, or you know, this kind of things. Maybe, I don't know.
How this affect you in your adult stage?
Yeah, I think I didn't know it until very recently, but about 3 or 4 years ago, I had what I call like a crisis, where I suddenly became aware of all of those things, those little weeds that were sown in my youth, that had come to the surface. And I realised, looking back on my actions throughout my 20s and early 30s, that a lot of my relationships and a lot of my the things I did and the motivation had all these negative things behind it. So like self-serving, manipulation, and there was a lot of that, and kind of so I think when that happened, then I started to unpick. So I started to look when I was little, and I thought, oh yeah, maybe I was damaged by what happened, because up until that point I'd been like, I had a good childhood, it was fine. And it was in many ways, but there was a lot of hurt in there and a lot of like abandonment issue and like a typical like textbook sort of. If I sat on a like a psychiatrist sofa, I'm sure they could tell me, you know, this is because. So that happened a few years ago, and it all happened at once. It was like the floodgates opened, and it was related to spirituality as well, because I believe that it was, because I'm a Christian, which you know, that it was almost like God was saying it was time, like, to show me this is the bad things in your life. These are the things that are growing, and if you don't stop it now, it can get a hold of you and it can strangle your life and ruin things. So I believe when my eyes were opened in that sense, and I saw the way these things have affected me in a negative way, I believe it was a kind of a just-in-time moment. Rather than things happen and it's too late and you can't get it back, it was more like, just be careful now, this is the point, you need to make some decisions and you need to change. So that's when I think I noticed the impact from my youth.
Did you go to the psychologist, or do you have support, professional support?
Not professional. No, I had a conversation with my cousin recently. She goes to, she sees a therapist. In fact, so many of my friends do, and I like the idea of therapy. But because of my belief, where I'm coming from, I think I would need to speak to a professional who has this same kind of, would come from the same perspective, if that makes sense. So with like some sort of godly Christian background, because if not, I know I would be sitting across from someone and they could be very like aware of all these problems, but the way they would think to solve it or what the issue was would be opposing what I believe is the issue. And so I think I wouldn't get on. But I'm not against the idea of therapy. I would love to meet a Christian therapist, actually. And in many ways, a lot of people in the church, like the pastor in the church, is often in this capacity. But I speak to my mum because my mum is a Christian and she is able to be impartial, which is incredible. And she's also able to hear the like most shameful secrets of mine without judging me. And so I trusted her with a lot. Through that time, I called my mum in tears a lot, and she would talk to me about like what I was going through. So I did have therapy, but it wasn't professional.
Yeah, well, like yourself, you know.
Yeah.
Do you have children?
Yes.
Yes. What do you think a child needs?
I think they need to feel secure. I think they need stability in some way, but that doesn't have to mean that they like need to be in the same house all their life, etc. Because I moved a lot when I was a child, and when my children were young, me and my husband traveled a lot, and I don't think that you need to necessarily be stable in a place, but you need to have some kind of anchor in the home, whether that's routine with your parents. Just know that your parents love you. I think that's actually what, just to know that you're safe with your parents and that they won't reject you and they won't leave you in that sense. I think that's what a child needs.
What have you learned from your children?
Again, when I looked at this question, I thought a positive and a negative, because that's allowed, isn't it?
Yeah.
So positively, I mean, I've learned to look at things in a new way, which I'm sure lots of parents say, but the simplest things, or what I believe is simplest things, or things that I've known for a long time, when questioned by a child, you have to reevaluate, and they say, why is it like that? And so it makes you go, oh, actually, maybe I'm not right about that. Let me look that up, and then you look it up. So it keeps you learning, and it stops you from, or it checks your prejudices, like what's it called? When you've already, preconception, when you've already made up your mind about something, then they challenge that, which I love. And obviously, everything they see is through eyes like with wonder, and that affects you because you can't help but be lifted up with somebody around you who's vibrant. And again, if I'm deeply depressed or deeply sad, which I am at times, and I have to read the bedtime story and I have to make the dinner, it pulls me out of this place where I could just lie down in bed. So this I'm very grateful for, and they show me, that life goes on in that sense, and it can still be beautiful even if you're sad. And then on the negative, might sound a bit like controversial, but having children has shown me that there is a dark nature in human beings that isn't necessarily learned by. But I never taught my children to lie, for example. I told them the opposite. I said lying is bad, but they would still lie to me sometime.
Mhm.
So they didn't learn that in that sense. But there's a kind of part of them that is a part of every human being that has a tendencies to go towards darkness, to protect yourself, self-preservation, and selfishness. That's why selfishness rather than selflessness. Just a part of the nature, not all of the nature. But I've seen this in children because before I had children, I always thought in a proud way, my kids will be perfectly disciplined, perfectly respectful at all times. Like I won't like have them do this or eat too much sugar, or you know, you have these ideas in your head about how to raise your children. And even with the best will in the world, obviously you make so many mistakes. Children like are human beings, and human beings are flawed. We have flaws, and so even like the youngest child, they're flaws. And actually to understand that and have empathy, I think it helps you to raise them well, to kind of accept they're flawed like you are. They make mistakes and I make mistakes, and it's part of our nature to make mistakes, rather than that children are perfectly innocent, because in a way they are innocent, like obviously. But I don't know if I'm being clear.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
But I learned this from my children, because sometimes in my eyes I'm shocked. I don't know why I'm shocked that they would lie to me or do something bad, and it's like, well, why should you be shocked? They're just humans like you are, you know. They make mistakes. So.
What have you learned from the life in general?
I don't. This is such a hard question. I don't. I've learned that things are constantly changing, and that whatever state you're in right now isn't going to be necessarily like that tomorrow, and that's a really good thing, because it really helps in depression, because I have tendencies towards depression. And I remember when I first felt this feeling of depression, because it happens to everyone for the first time, I could understand why people could harm themselves and why people could take their own life. I contemplated, would a life that was filled with this pain, would that be worth living? All these things. But when you're really depressed or sad or stuck in that moment, it's really hard to imagine that your life could ever be anything else ever again. But living through enough of life now, I've been in dark places and I've been in light places, and then I go in the dark again and I come back to the light. So now I suppose what life is teaching me, what God is teaching me in my life, is that I know that it's okay, I can have a peace when I'm in darkness, because I know it's just a momentary phase, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I think that's really important, because a lot of people like take their life or end their life because they can't imagine life would ever be any different from how it is right then and there, and it's so much pain for them in that moment. They think, well, I can't live like this, and so they take their life, and so they don't get the chance to see what life teaches them in that sense, you know, like that
Adaptability.
that you can change, that you can come out of this, and maybe you'll go back in again or into a different kind of darkness, but the point is that you can come out, that you won't always be in this state. So I think that's a really important thing that I've learned in life.
It's a good one. If you had the power to change something in the world, what would be? What would be?
Maybe like this, we talk about that people could kind of not be so trapped in their moment, in the sense we should live in the moment. People say live in the moment, but also if you live too much in, like, if you just think, right, well, whatever I'm feeling right now, I think live in the moment is always associated with positivity. So it's like, do what makes you feel happy, you know, this kind of thing. But if you're living in the moment and you're deeply depressed in that moment, then I think it has a different feeling. I suppose, like, you don't want to live in that moment. You would rather live in another moment. And so, what would I don't know, what would I change? What would I, just that I think people could just open their eyes and see other people's beliefs and perspectives in a kind of non-threatened way. Like I think sometimes people are afraid of other people's beliefs or feel threatened, and then will attack. and so it kind of closes off conversation. I think if people were less afraid and more open to change, and the idea that what you believe today you might be completely contradicted tomorrow, and to be okay with that, I think if that makes sense, I would like to the world to do that.
What do you do when are you having hard times?
So I pray a lot, pray constantly. Like in the Bible it says pray without ceasing. When I was a child I didn't understand that, because I thought, how could you have a life that you're just constantly praying? But I suppose the idea is like whenever you're doing something, like the prayer is in your mind, in the shower, in the kitchen, cooking, you can just have this prayer in your mind. And now I read the Bible when I feel low, and I try to read it every day now, because I think it's a huge part of being a Christian is that we believe the Bible is the Word of God, and the Word of God is nourishing for your spirit. And if you skip a meal in this physical world and you feel hunger pain, and you eventually waste away and you starve, and I think the same with this Word. If I stay away from the Word, then my spirit starts to wither, but if I go to the Word, then it starts to flourish again.
For you, what love means?
For me, I think ultimately, because it's so complex and deep, self-sacrifice, like sacrificial, like this kind of image comes into my head. So giving of yourself to somebody or something or a higher cause, it's like, and giving, almost like willing to give all of yourself is real love, I think. Because I think if you're willing to give that much, I think a lot of people are afraid with love to be open and to give that much, because they think they'll lose something, because if you give it out then you can't replenish it. But I find it quite the opposite to be true, in that the more you sort of freely love and give it, the more you have. It kind of replenishes, and then you can give it to somebody else. And I don't know, a perfect example is like when I had my first child, and I thought I loved that child so much, I couldn't imagine loving anybody else like that. And then I had a second child, and of course I didn't take a bit of love from her to give to him. I have a whole new love for him. This love kept growing. So I think people sometimes are afraid if they give of themselves in love, because they might get hurt, that they won't have enough left for themselves or something else, and so they're a bit more reserved with love. So I think love for me means sort of giving of all of yourself, and the kind of unconditionally as well. Not because somebody is good and deserves it, because I don't believe I deserve love in that sense. I don't believe because that means I have to have earned it, and I didn't earn it. I think love is a free gift, and it should always be given freely. Yeah.
What do you think about hate and forgiveness?
I think I more struggle with the word hate than I do with love. Some people find love difficult to talk about or to give. I'm all about love.
Mm-hmm.
And hate is difficult because hate feels like something that would be damaging to you if you have it. But I think there are things that you should hate. I feel like humans should hate evil, like, as a concept. I don't mean a person who is doing something evil, because we're all capable of evil. But the thing of evil, like the thing of love, like what is love?
The action?
Yeah. Well, not the action, like the kind of almost like, it's almost conceptual, but whatever it is that possesses somebody at the time to do something horrendous to somebody else, that's evil. So if it's something that comes upon, like whatever it is, the seed that's planted, or some people say like a demon, don't they? Or they say like a disease. Whatever it is that goes into a human being to make them do something despicable, that I think what we should hate. I think you should hate that, and you should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's about as far as I would go with hate. I wouldn't ever say it was right to hate a person or even a thing. Like, I don't know, people have problems with drinking, don't they? Alcohol. Don't hate alcohol, in that sense. You hate the thing that captivates someone to drink to themselves to death. You hate that thing, whatever that is, that belief or thought or seed. that's what I think about hate.
And forgiveness?
Yeah, I think forgiveness should be you should always forgive, and even if a person isn't necessarily sorry, but the act of forgiveness isn't about for me isn't about that a person apologizes and then you let them off the hook and it's like a transaction, like you get this and I get that. The act of forgiveness is I don't know, recognizing that again we're all flawed, we all make mistakes, and if we weren't forgiven ourselves, like how let me rephrase that. The fact, because obviously my faith, I believe I've been forgiven from my sin, and my sin is given over to God. He's taken it away. And the act of sacrificial love, so that Jesus would die as a punishment, to take the punishment for sin, which is the Christian faith, that God would accept death upon himself so that we could live. It's like that was a transactional thing. And then the forgiveness was given freely because we didn't earn it. So we didn't do something nice for God and then he's like, right, do you know what? Because you did that nice thing for me, I'll do this nice thing for you. So forgiveness should always be given without the expectation of getting something back. So because I've seen people who don't forgive someone and you think, well, rightly so, because they weren't sorry. Like, you know, that somebody who's done something awful in their life, like a parent, like a bad father, and the child won't forgive because they can't, because they say, well, they never came to me, they never apologized, they don't think they did anything wrong, and they carry this bitterness that again like takes root and becomes something evil in their life and affects their children and other friends around them, and they don't quite see that the root of that is that something bad happened to them, but at the same time they need to actively, it's not easy, to let go of that and to forgive for themselves as well as for the other person or whatever. It's much about like, letting go of the thing that would. I've just seen so many people that don't forgive, twisted and bitter, and actually end up doing the thing to somebody else that they're so upset that somebody did to them. They repeat the same mistake because it's so ingrained in them. And forgiveness then is letting go, isn't it? Yeah. If hatred is like holding on, and even love in a way is holding on, forgiveness is letting go of something.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you here, and hope everyone enjoy this interview. And I'm sure you will take lots of things from this interview for your own life. And see you in the next interview, and hope all of you are doing very well. Bye-bye.